is such a densely populated and high-income island, it should have the most expensive housing on Earth. So how did it figure out how to have such affordable housing? Where a 2-bedroom apartment sells for just $150K, and that's before grants, which can be up to $60K for first-time home owners. Well, we should start with the country's philosophy on housing. When you rent a home, you might not care about it as much because you might leave next year anyway. But when you own a home, you make it look nice and clean and get to know your community. So if everyone owns their home, you will naturally create a high-trust, clean, and safe society. And it is the government's obligation to achieve this goal for the people, as the government is the only landlord that will have the public's interest at heart rather than private profits. Obviously, this relies on having government officials who aren't corrupt, but Singapore has lucked out with having some of the best statesmen over the last 100 years, such as Lee Kuan Yew, who genuinely cared about his people. And the country ranks 3rd least corrupt on Earth. Because of this ideology, Singapore is one of the few countries where public housing isn't seen as the projects, it's seen as genuinely high quality. And the Singaporean government sells this public housing, which 80% of Singaporeans live in. So what moves did the Singaporean government take to somehow make their housing high quality and affordable? Well, a big problem in many countries is allowing wealthy foreign investors to buy up all the property and drive up prices for the locals. So in Singapore, you typically have to be Singaporean to buy a home from the government. And even if you are Singaporean, if you try to buy up multiple properties from the government, you get taxed heavily for it, so you don't just buy up an entire area and rent it out with jacked up prices. Singapore also has zero tolerance for speculators because housing is for living in, not for speculating in and flipping for a profit. So if you try this, you also get heavily taxed. On the other hand, if you're a first-time home buyer, your intentions are probably pure because you just want somewhere to live so you don't get taxed. And you could even get a grant to buy your home so that low and middle income households aren't stuck paying rent every month and can start to build their wealth. And affordability aside, because the government owns 80% of housing, it can do city design efficiently, where the housing is optimally connected to the country's public transit network, and where every Singaporean can live in a complete community with easy access to schools, shops, and an abundance of greenery. One thing that may feel like a downside is that you can usually only keep your home for 99 years before the home gets returned to the government to be sold to someone else. The idea is that you, as the buyer, worked hard and saved your money to buy this house, so these 99 years are enough to set you up for life as you deserve. But this doesn't set up all your kids and grandkids for life, giving them unearned privileges over other less fortunate kids and creating intergenerational wealth inequality. As the Singaporean Prime Minister stated in an interview, if all land in Singapore becomes freehold, the ones who will benefit will be today's landowners and their children. But new generations who don't have housing bequeathed to them will find it very, very hard to have access to affordable housing. The other thing that could be seen as a downside is that the government forces you to save at least 20% of your paycheck, where you're allowed to use these savings to buy a house or pay for retirement. The government holds on to your savings until then, but it doesn't just splurge it actually manages it pretty well by basically creating a hedge fund for the people, similar to Norway's sovereign wealth fund. And this fund has grown so large that if theoretically divided amongst Singaporeans, it would make each Singaporean worth at least $300,000 just by itself. It's pretty interesting because Singapore is by no means a socialist country, but when it comes to housing, they're pretty socialist about it, as it's possible that housing is just a